Speaking of flow, let's go to UP Visayas in Iloilo. I suppose there is a question already waiting. UP Iloilo, come in.
This question is from Alan Moscoso, University Research Associate of the School of Technology. The need for more meteorological stations or rain gauges have been presented in several DRM fora. How do you propose to do this? Should PAG-ASA implement this, or should any other government agency take the lead?
And the director or the administrator of our agencies in the audience today, who may also, I would hope, provide another answer. But in the meantime, is there an opinion coming from our speakers this afternoon?
Well, yes. As mentioned earlier, we need to identify population centers that are vulnerable to flooding. And then from these population centers, then we move up to the watershed. And then from that watershed, then decide where to put the meteorological stations. There are independent efforts by private groups and by other universities in doing this. In relation to coastal communities, for example, the Marine Science Institute deployed 12 meteorological units, but we have our own criteria for choosing the sites. Manila Observatory is deploying the same number of stations in different parts of the country. And we know that companies like SMART and Globe, that they are partnering together to also install some meteorological stations using their tower stations as base. But Prisco Nilo, who is the director of PAG-ASA, is here, and I know that there are plans afoot for setting up additional stations in the Philippines, and I think he is in a good position to give specifics as to where these additional stations will be placed.
I believe that Administrator Prisco Nilo may honor us with a reply as well.
I thought I'll just be listening to.
Anyway, you never know, sir, when it rains, it pours.
Anyway, we have a lot of plans, but things like this really boils down to the budget. We have done a lot of initiatives already. Other government agencies and even the private sector are also installing mostly rain gauges in different parts of the country. And for PAG-ASA, there was mention about the telcos. We have initiated that already. We came up with an MOU because we want to put up rain gauges and a full-scale meteorological station in the mountains, but nobody's there. Was going to take care of maybe after 24 hours, it's gone already. So we've come up with an MOU with the telecommunication companies. They have cell sites in the mountains. So we can put up rain gauges there, and we have started doing that. And we are in the process of procuring a few more, but we need more budget to be able to increase the number of rain gauges to be installed all over the country. It's very important for many things: flood and landslide warning, for agricultural purposes, and many other things. For synoptic stations, we do have plans. We only have 58 synoptic stations all over the country. We have how many provinces? 88. So there are still so many provinces with no synoptic station. We should be able to at least establish one synoptic station in every province, and we have a long way to go.
Thank you, Dr. Nilo. In fact, we would like to ask also the reaction of our one of our presenters, Dr. Lansigan.
Okay. Well, the weather stations or putting up weather instruments is not that costly anymore. There are cheaper systems that can be put in place. And one strategy being followed by certain groups is, mobilizing the local government units by sensitizing them on the importance of putting up this, particularly as part of the early warning system. So I think that's one strategy that we should pursue, just like, well, we have examples already, like what's going on in Albay. if we have politicians like, well, the governor there, then that will not be a problem. So we need to mobilize and get the support of the local government units.
Well, if we may add, based on discussions of our panels in the past, we have been suggesting that official stations by our weather agency may well be complemented, just like many things, with citizen or community-based stations that engineers are very fond of setting up. But in the end, we do recognize that for the data to be used comprehensively, the agency like Pagasa should be able to take the lead. I think we need to move to the next campus in the meantime and come back to the audience here at NISMED because UP Mindanao is back. Allow me to read the question. To reduce water-related risks and disasters that you presented, who is this you? Ano? Maybe all of us. Will entail much action from all sectors. How are we going to encourage LGUs specifically to act when they do not have the capacity or the resources? Oh, yeah, the person asking is Loloy Aurelianeda, and he would like to hear first from Dr. Tabios.
I think in the last suggestion or last course of action that I mentioned was really to partner with an LGU. As a university, I think we have done a few of those in the past. UP Pahinungod, and in fact the CIDS in the late 1990s, we had some work with Lopez Haina in Misamis Occidental, Gihulngan Negros, through UPCIDS. So that could be one way as a university like UP or any other university can do. Now, perhaps if we have this pilot I mentioned about doing a field laboratory or a operational model for that matter, once we have that, I hope that all other LGUs can follow. And with, again, our ability to hopefully catalyze partnership with international agencies or private organizations, we can increase investments in DRM in these local government units.
In addition, Dr. Lansigan, if we remember, presented actual activities of UP Los Baños researchers already being done to bring outcomes of researches into the form of training and fora with local communities, local government units, in fact. So that should probably be just multiplied in all the UP campuses and beyond. Yes, we have time to take a question, another question from the floor. May I call Dr. Solidum, whom I notice has been raising his hand from 2 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you, Benny. This is maybe related to the very first question on the different suggestions presented by Glenn Tabios earlier. But let me just begin my question by telling you a story. In 2008, there was a very big typhoon, Typhoon Frank, that caused flooding in one very famous city in the Visayas. And the disaster manager of the province told me that a taxi driver told him that they are prepared for flood events ng isang dangkal. And the flood that happened during the passage of that typhoon, Typhoon Frank, isang dangkal rin. Kaya lang, lagpas tao. Okay. And also he mentioned na pati yung rescuer, initially they wanted to rescue people. Later on, they were asking for other rescuers to rescue the rescuer. My point is, it seems funny, but the point is, in many of the problems here in the country is that whether we want to prepare, whether we want to respond, whether we want to mitigate, the sorely lacking information is science-based scenarios. And for me, that is very important. Because if you look at Ondoy, you look at Typhoon Frank, even if people say they are prepared, they are not prepared for certain events like big flood events. So, well, this is a comment actually, but in the many suggestions that Glenn Tabios presented, many of these are already being done. Which do you think is the priority?
Dr. Tabios?
Yeah. For this specific issue that you are talking about, we have always advocated flood inundation studies. I don't think if flood inundation studies have been done in the country as a national effort. You've seen Angat. Metro Manila. When was the last time you had a real serious flood inundation study? San Roque, Lower Agno River Basin. Iloilo, I think that's what you mentioned, Iloilo City. A lot of these studies have not been done properly, if ever, or when we talk about what we call now sustainability science, we don't just look in the past, especially with climate change, but even without climate change, one of the tools in sustainability science is computer simulations, the ability to look at different scenarios, not for purposes of forecasting, but even prediction, no time.
Scenario-based.
And I think we mentioned that here. So, for example, if you develop, I'll just give you an example in the case of San Roque Dam during Typhoon Pepeng last year, there are protocols how to operate the reservoir. But I don't think if they have been properly checked against how much flood level you can expect for this much spill in the reservoir downstream. Nobody has done a flood inundation study downstream. So when you do warning, you just put on the siren, but you don't know what's the meaning of that. How much water, how much time you have to respond. So things like that should be done properly with science-based and in particular flood inundation studies, but then also computer simulations, scenario-based studies.
In effect, a science-based, science-generated scenario should be a tool, if not that tool, of community-based DRM preparation, I would imagine. As we have said, there may be warning systems in place, but they are generic. In the absence of a flood inundation model for a specific river basin, each one, it may not be easy to translate into reality.
Because otherwise they are not so meaningful. People will run, but where will they run? How much time they have?
So,
how far and how high will be the
such
flood
a general
elevations?
plan for preparedness has to be combined with a scientifically generated scenario to better guide in detail, like where and when. Dr. Siringan has been raising his hand since 3 o'clock.
Yun naman, mga 2:59 lang. Well, where we have flood models, kung meron man, the models were based on precipitation data from 30 years ago, or the models, they were based on the character of the landscape from 30 years ago, channels from 30 years ago. All this have changed. And there is a need to rerun the models using new parameters and then think ahead. Well, how dense will the population be? How dense will the houses be? How much more forest will we lose? And I think modeling will be a big tool in all of this. But we need good, not just daily rainfall. In fact, for flood forecasting, we need hourly rainfall data. And so there is a need for all of this information coming in. And again, the role of the university is we can help in coming up with like a checklist of have you done this, have you done that, have you done this for the modeling. And certainly there is no lack of expertise within the country or in this university.
Well, thank you, Ando, for pointing out that modeling has to be refined as information or data or even capability is improved. In fairness to the agencies responsible, and in answer to one of the questions earlier that said, if we knew all this time, how come we're not acting accordingly? I think the message is even modeling, forecasting, scenario-based forecasting in aid of community-based DRM really is evolving. But now that our panelists, the experts, are pointing out that we have accumulated now enough or much more information to use to update such scenario modelings to aid our action. We can take another question from the floor. Yes, I think VP Sartu